Hello, welcome to Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Here's a question for you to start off today's show. Does today's political climate leave you frustrated and discouraged? How about this question? When you think about politics, do you get a sinking feeling in your stomach? And one more question. Do you wonder if there is a way to speak truth without caving to fits of anger and name-calling? Those three questions are posed by my guest today on his author webpage. Two-term governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, is going to be here today to talk about his new book, Faithful Presence. And honestly, we can't get along in America because of all the schisms created by the far left for political design on purpose. So we absolutely need a higher power right now to help calm tensions, to help steer this ship called America on a pathway to continued freedom. Bill Haslam will be here. Well, he'll be on the phone to talk about his new book, Faith in Politics. This is something that America drastically, crucially needs right now. Before I get into that, heads up. Listeners of Bold and Blunt can take advantage of a special Washington Times offer for a 50% off deal for access for a full year to the digital platform of the Washington Times. That's all that the Washington Times puts out on its digital platform. It's news, it's great investigative reports, it's great commentaries, and it's all the podcasts that we have to offer. It's not just Bold and Blunt, there are plenty more. Just go to washingtontimes.com/Cheryl, type in your info, 50% off a year's access, the digital platform. And while you're at it, why not sign up for my 3 times a week newsletter delivered straight to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? It contains all my commentaries all week long and my 2 podcasts I do twice a week, Bold and Blunt, right to your email box. Just go to washingtontimes.com, find my hyperlinked name, click on it, scroll to the bottom, and there will be some easy peasy ways how to sign up for my thrice weekly. There's a word you don't get to use that often. Thrice. My 3 times a week newsletter delivered right to your email box. I would be very happy if you signed on to this newsletter, not only because it makes me look really good with my bosses at the Washington Times, but I know that it arms you with all the bullet points you need to fight the far leftist liars who are just busily trying to tear down America. And speaking of lies, have you heard the lies from the secular left talking about separation of church and state, that politics and religion, never the two shall meet, that God belongs in the churches on Sundays, but back in the box Monday through Saturday? It's a lie. It's a complete, utter fabrication of the left. Why? Well, the left does not want American citizens to believe in God. Look, I know that's a generality. I know that that's probably broadening the truth a little bit, because there certainly are some Democrats out there who believe in God, right? There are some really church-going, Bible-believing, biblically focused Democrats. I just haven't met any, so I'm assuming that they are out there. So let's just look at what the left pushes, though, and you can see why it's so hard to understand that there actually are Democrats who believe in God. Look, the left pushes abortion, and not just abortion in instances of incest or rape, but abortion on demand, abortion as just another form of birth control. Well, you can't afford your pill? Well, just get an abortion. Planned Parenthood will cover it for you. The left pushes open borders, which is another way of saying no law, no order. And I'm pretty sure that at least half of the Bible, or at least a good portion of the Bible, called the Old Testament, contains plenty of laws and orders that we are commanded to live by, right? Remember, Jesus didn't come to take away from the law, but to add to it. So, if you believe in God and you believe in biblical truths, you can't discount law and order as something that has been set up and ordained by God. Chaos is the way of Satan, right? It's also the way of the Democrats. They like to do things like say boys can be girls simply by putting on a skirt and a fancy ribbon in their hair. And then that is their free pass. A pink ribbon is their free pass into girls' bathrooms and restrooms in public school systems. They like to say that there are more than two sexes. There are not just males and females. There are countless, numerous other sexes, as many as the stars in the sky almost. You know how God promised to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky? Well, Democrats have sort of a takeoff on that. They promise to make human genders as numerous as the stars in the sky. Almost anyhow. The whole LGBTQ movement, fabrication of the left. Why? Because it tears down the family values. It destroys traditions. It completely upsets norms. And the way it's going now, it's not just a thing of tolerance. It's not just that the LGBTQ movement is pushing tolerance and acceptance. They want you to buy into the lie and actually further the lie. It's not enough for a boy to call himself a girl now. But now that boy who calls himself a girl insists that you call him a girl as well. Or he'll sue. And in this climate, in this contentious political climate, half the courts in America would find in favor of the boy who pretends to be a girl and wants you to pretend that he's a girl too. So it's not enough to just live and let live. It's not enough to just say, well, you live your life how you want, I'll live my life how I want. No, the left wants you to accept the lie and to further the lie and to actually become an active participant in the lie. That's just evil. That's just evil. And I'm pretty sure the Bible speaks against evil. And, you know, there's something else that the left does that I find curious. If for Democrats who say that they're Bible believers and Democrats who say that they believe in God, it's this whole long-running theme they have that there is no actual standard. There's no standard of truth. There's no moral standard, that there are no absolutes, that things are constantly changing and the Constitution should change in accordance with the will of the people, and the Bible should change in accordance with the modern times will of the people. There are no hard and fast standards in much of the left, in much of the Democrat Party. And that to me seems in direct conflict with biblical teachings too, because God doesn't change, right? He sets the standard. He puts out the standard in his Bible for us to read and to follow if we so choose. But he doesn't change. He doesn't say, yeah, you know what? It's 2021 right now. And that thing about adultery in those 10 commandments, you know, times have changed too much, and that just seems archaic. And, you know, there are too many teenagers in America right now who are just busily hooking up with whomever and having free recreational sex. And when the girls get pregnant, they just have abortions, and it's pretty accepted in society right now that that's common, and we should tolerate that, and not just tolerate it, but we should accept it and even embrace it, because love is love, and so long as everybody feels love, then we can excuse things. Well, God doesn't change and say that. That's how the left wants it. That's how Democrats want it to become. They want you to believe that any nonsense like hard and fast moral compasses or hard and fast principles and standards based on virtues and God forbid biblical principles, they want you to believe that those are out of date and they need to be pushed to the side. And they want it believed so badly that they will change God and they will change biblical truths in order to teach you, in order to teach the next generation, in order to persuade you that society has changed so much that God now accepts society how it is, as immoral as it is, and God has actually changed to go along with society's immorality. That's an utter lie. So, the plan here from the Democrat Party is if they can't do away with God, they'll degrade God to the point where God isn't even God anymore and anything goes. And part of that, of course, is to attack anybody who dares to stand publicly for truthful biblical principles. Why do you think they hated Reagan so much? Right?
Reagan had this strong sense of God's providence, and he would say all the time, surely this happened because God willed it this way.
Right? That was Reagan. And Reagan, he wasn't any different really from the founding fathers on that. The left, the Democrats on the left, the socialists, the communists, the collectivists, the Marxists, all part and parcel of the Democrat Party. And as I said, maybe there are a few Democrats out there who are true Bible believers, but after I just ran down all the things that the Democrat Party stands for that is so against biblical truths, I still don't understand how they can be part and parcel of the Democrat Party. But there you have it. So to back up what I was saying, Reagan wasn't so different from founding fathers on that. The left likes to hide that and disguise that and lie about that, but our country indeed was based, in large part, on Christian principles, on Judeo-Christian principles, but in particular on Christian principles. Listen to this, American Minute, Bill Federer's page. I'm going to quote from it. On January 1st, 1802, the people of Cheshire, Massachusetts, maybe it's Cheshire, Massachusetts, delivered a giant block of cheese weighing 1,235 pounds to President Thomas Jefferson, being presented by the famous Baptist preacher John Leland. On the block of cheese, they put Jefferson's motto, which was also on his personal seal. And what was it? What did it say? Quote, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." That's the Thomas Jefferson that the left likes to claim is the founding father who was so secular that he created this iron wall called separation of church and state. And what that phrase actually meant, according to the left, was that there should be no weaving of politics with faith, that church was church and politics and government were politics and government, and the two never meet. That it's okay to go to church on Sunday, but by God, you better leave that God in church on Sunday when you go to work on Monday. And if you speak about God at your job in politics, well, you're violating separation of church and state. That is what the left wants to sell. And again, the reason they want to sell that is because the left does not want to compete with God. The left wants to become your God. They don't put it out there so boldly and bluntly like I just did. They don't lay it out there that obviously because they knew if they put it forth, their ultimate end game, that a lot of Americans who are on the rope about religion, who maybe aren't such Bible-based believers or aren't regular churchgoers, they knew that if they put it out there so bluntly that their end game is to remove God from society and to turn America into a 100% secular country, they knew that there are people out there who would buck that it would turn their stomach, because even though these people aren't regular churchgoers or Bible believers. They still know the history of this country, and they still know that the Judeo-Christian principles are still part and parcel of the foundation of the country. And they would fight that. So they have to disguise it. They have to pretend like, the First Amendment, religious freedom, means something for those religious people, but by and large, we have a separation of church and state in this country, and you have to leave your religion at home when you go to work. Well, that is so opposite of this nation. Let me continue reading from American Minute. Colonial Virginia, I'm quoting now, had an establishment of the Church of England, or Anglican Church, from 1606 to 1786. An establishment meant, okay, this is the definition. You have to look at the actual definition of the word, and you have to look at how it was defined back then, not how the left wants to redefine it today for political exploitative purposes. So establishment meant mandatory membership. In other words, to be part of colonial Virginia, you had to be a member of this Church of England. Mandatory taxes to support it. That's right, tax dollars went to the church, and no one could hold public office unless they were a member. Imagine that. The left, the Democrats, the socialists, the secularists, the atheists, they're all one and the same. They sell the lie that America was founded on secular principles, that founding fathers did not believe in God, that founding fathers were not Christians, and so that meant founding fathers were completely secular. And look, colonial Virginia. In order to hold public office, you had to be a member of this particular church. And what church is it? Church of England, a Christian denomination. My, how far Virginia has come now, huh? Land of the Democrats, land of the socialists, if you pay attention to Richmond politics. Let me read you one more quote from this American Minute. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Lafayette Black wrote in Engel versus Vitale, 1962. Here's the quote of what the justice wrote. When some of the very groups which had most strenuously opposed the established Church of England found themselves sufficiently in control of colonial governments in this country of America, that's what he's referring to, in this country to write their own prayers into law, they passed laws making their own religion the official religion of their respective colonies. The colonies were rooted in their own official religions of the colonists. And they all had requirements such as, in order to hold public office in that colony, you had to be a member of that church. In order to do this, to do that, you had to be a member of the church. So when the Democrats tell you that this nation was not founded on Christian principles, you know what? Play them this segment of Bold and Blunt. Or go to American Minute and write down these quotes. Or go to the records on Capitol Hill in the Library of Congress and see it yourself. But whatever you do, speak up and don't let the left sell that lie. It's such bogus, and it's so obvious that this nation is rooted in its Christian principles. And my guest today, former governor of Tennessee, Bill Haslam, he has a book out talking about faith, the importance of faith. And I think this book is so timely because in this nation right now, everything goes back to the battle of principalities. Look at what's going on in the political world, and you can look at this through biblical principles, and you can see clearly that the fight's not really about Republican versus Democrat or Republican versus socialist. Those are little battles, little skirmishes. But the real battle here is the same battle that's always been. It's the battle of principalities. good versus evil. Satan trying to steal God's glory. So, two-term governor of Tennessee, former mayor, two-term mayor in Tennessee as well, Bill Haslam. He's here to talk about his new book and to talk about the importance of faith, especially in today's politically charged, hostile environment. Bill, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thanks. Thanks for allowing me to be on the show.
So you have this great new book that's just coming out or just came out?
Came out a couple of weeks ago, so it's been out for, about 2 weeks.
This is a really important book for America right now, Faithful Presence. And in it, you promise to talk about the answer to perpetual outrage. That's something that grabbed my attention. How do we deal with that in America using faith?
Well, I think two or three things. I think one of the things that people of faith bring to the public square is this idea that kind of particularly fundamental to the Christian faith is this idea that we're all imperfect, broken people in our own ways, and so we should approach the public square with a certain humility, knowing that we don't get it right in every other part of our lives, so we probably don't have it 100% right when it comes to our views on public issues as well. So we enter with humility and a willingness to say, what's the right answer here, not just what's my answer.
So don't you find it very fascinating how the left has nearly successfully sold the lie that America was built on secular principles?
Well, I think that there's a whole lot of things that are interesting about today's world, and I mean, it's worth noting that our world is becoming more secular. You can look at the data in terms of church attendance, in terms of a lot of things that point it that way. I think the question is, what do we as Christians do about that? Is it, the line I quote a lot is, Jesus says, if the world's going bad, and equates the world to the meat. If the meat goes bad, is it the meat's fault or the salt's fault? And so one of the things that I think we should ask ourselves is as Christians, as people who are supposed to be the salt and light in society, if society's going bad, is that whose fault is it, and what should we be doing about it?
Right. And in your book, you make a case that Christians are key to bringing America back to calmer times. Explain how that would happen.
Well, I think a couple things. I think, again, a little bit with if we approach issues with the humility that we're called to. The second is this: we're people that understand that it's truth and love. Okay, it's not one or the other. It's mercy and justice. It's not one or the other. And a lot of people are saying, hey, we want justice now, but we don't. At the end of the day, we want justice. We want the bad guys to get caught, but we also want mercy. We know that we're not perfect, and the people around us aren't either. And so we should be people who are looking for both of those things. And the same thing with truth and love. I know a lot of people, and you do too, take great pride in saying, hey, I'm always standing up for the truth, and people don't like what I say. But the Bible tells us to speak the truth with love, and one without the other. Love without truth is no good either. One without the other is a recipe for disaster.
I'm glad you brought that point up, because one of the things that those of weak faith or of secular views like to say is that Jesus was all about love. So that means that anything goes, standards of behavior are out the window. And if you're a true Christian, you have to allow me to live my life like that. And that's just not so, is it?
Well, Jesus is the one who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. That's not somebody who's taken a mushy approach to truth. That's somebody who's very definitive about what truth is. But again, that's why that's why I think what's unique about Christianity and the role Christians should play is we should bring both of those to the public square, truth and love, not one without the other.
So what was the genesis of this book? How did you conceive of it? Why did you conceive of it?
I got to spend 2 terms as a mayor of Knoxville, 2 terms as governor in Tennessee, and like everyone else, you see this incredible polarization in our country, and folks not just being divided, but being mad and contemptuous of the other side. And one of the things that struck me was that Christians and people of faith were acting just like everyone else. We're just as likely to kind of hide behind the anonymity of the internet to say things we'd never say in person. We're just as likely to try to score a big win on Twitter, but with a clever remark. And we're not out trying to say, what can we actually do to make this better? What can we do to actually solve problems instead of just to make a show?
So it's been my viewpoint for some time now that America is facing sort of these secular, morally adrift times, largely because Christians have grown silent in recent years. And you just said yourself that a lot of Christians have not behaved so much as Christians, but have behaved more as if they're worldly. Do you see Christians as to blame for the nation's current moral crisis?
Well, I certainly wouldn't single out Christians and say that people of faith that we Christians are to blame.
Okay.
But I do think back to when something goes wrong, we should look and say, what role have we played in this, and how can we make this better? It's easy to. I think one of the things that's the issue with all of us today is we're all looking and saying it's their fault. It's their fault. And we know, just like in a disagreement in a marriage or in a friendship or anything else, it's rarely all one person's fault. There's usually a part, like when there's something wrong in my marriage, I know that it's at least partially my fault if you dig down there somewhere.
I'm sure your wife would have a little difference of opinion on the partially.
Yeah, she would say more than partially, more than most of the time.
Okay, so the press release for this book says that in your book you detail the most essential character trait for a public servant. I assume that you mean, at least in part, humility, because you touched on that. But what else?
I think the two things I would point to is humility, and then second, a real desire to make a difference instead of make a point. I think you'd agree with me. It's too easy in today's political world where you can get lots of social media attention and others just by putting a certain show on. But it's become more rare for people who are actually, whether they're in Washington or their state capitol or their city hall, who actually really want to make a difference and solve problems. And I would hope that people of faith in the public square are there to actually, our job is to serve, and serving means solving problems, and that we're actually trying to do that.
That's a really good compass, the way you said that, Bill. Make a difference versus make a point. You can apply that to not just outside the political life as well. You could apply that to everything you do.
I think, it's unfortunately in today's world, it's a lot easier just to jump up on the desk or table and yell and make a point, but that doesn't actually solve any problems. And I was struck that the years I was fortunate enough to be in office by the people who really were actually trying to make a difference. And I would encourage folks to support candidates who they think can actually really solve problems instead of just make a great point.
Now, here's the $1 million question, because everything that you say, I agree with completely. But the tone of the Democrat Party is not so much about working with Republicans or working with conservatives or even nowadays working on behalf of America. It just seems so far left and vicious. How do you work with that? Or am I reading the tea leaves wrong?
Well, you'd start with this. You talked earlier about a lot of Jesus's words aren't just, love and then whatever you want to do. And some of those things to us are really hard words, like love your enemies. That's really, really hard to do, right? Mm-hmm. We're told not just to not despise them or to not like them, but we're actually supposed to love them. And whether you're on the right or left, the same words apply. So I think the reality is in today's political world, we've both been guilty, those of us on the right and people on the left, of despising our enemies, and it's not getting us anywhere.
But loving your political enemies doesn't mean you have to give in to their far leftist principles.
Absolutely not. It does. I heard someone describe, and I'll steal a term. It's not mine, but he said, we should be firm on the inside and soft on the outside. You know, we should be firm in our convictions, but we should be generous toward others in the way we approach them, in terms of being willing to try to understand their point before we fire back at them with our point. Because the truth is, have you ever changed your mind because somebody has had a really clever put down or response to your argument? No, you do it when they make a persuasive argument that causes you to listen and think. And that's the same with us when we're, making our points to the other side. When we're trying to put them down with a really, like I said, clever talk, we're probably not going to change their minds.
What is it in the end that you want people to take from your book?
I think it's this. This stuff matters. I mean, how we govern really makes a difference. And I think one of the things that I'm asking people of faith is to look. Let's focus on the way that we govern and the way that we enter the public square, as much as we do on the issues that divide us. Because I think the things that Jesus calls us to are not dependent upon situation. You're not supposed to, be honest unless your business is getting ready to go down the tubes, or you're not supposed to be faithful in your marriage unless the person in the office next to you is really great looking. We don't make those exceptions. But in politics, we're kind of saying, well, because this matters so much, because the stakes are so high, then we don't have to play by the same rules.
So there are some on the left who would automatically dismiss you, sleight of hand, because they would say that you are violating separation of church and state. And
right.
You would say to that?
I would say you've missed, I think, the point in the brilliance of our founders. The beauty of what America did in its founding documents is it said faith is so important, religion is so important, that the government's not going to play any role in it. It's not going to establish it, nor is it going to prohibit the free exercise of that faith. And so if you try to exclude people of faith from the public square, think about who all we're excluding. Everyone from many of our founders to the people who ran the Underground Railroad, people like Harriet Beecher Stowe, to Abraham Lincoln, and I can keep going with people who, because of their faith, said, I think we can start this hospital, build these schools, help these people. All of that motivated by their faith. And the people who say, oh, don't bring your religion to the public square, I think are asking for an America that none of us want to see.
Do you have any friends in the Democrat Party?
I do. I was governor for 8 years, and like I said, there were several Democratic governors who I got to know well. Because we didn't agree on several key issues, but I did appreciate their heart and what they were trying to do, even if I didn't agree with what they were trying to do.
Okay, so where can people get this book? I know it's out by Thomas Nelson, HarperCollins.
It's out. It should be at bookstores anywhere. It's available online from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, just kind of really wherever you buy books, it should be available.
Faithful Presence, the promise and the peril of faith in the public square. It sounds fantastic, and it's got to be one of the most important reads today, because anything that can bring society together is something that people need to read. Bill Haslam, thank you so much for your time on Bold and Blunt. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. I really enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you letting me have the time.
Sure. God bless.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Faithful Presence. I am going to pick up a copy of this because I want those words of wisdoms on how to be a uniter and not a divider. I think we can all use more of that, right? I mean, Jesus was a peacemaker. He didn't come to bring peace the first time. He came to save and to offer a way for eternal life. And that goes for Republicans, Democrats, that goes for all. So I guess it is incumbent on Christians to follow that example. And as Bill Haslam has pointed out in his book, partisanship is the mark of today's era. We need to work toward uniting, not dividing. Faithful Present, The Promise and the Peril of Faith in the Public Square. I'm going to pick up a copy, and I hope you do as well. In the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.